Sustainable business is a part of education. Do you believe it? Well, the Bainbridge Graduate Institute does, and in fact, they have an entire university based on it. We're very fortunate to have Jill Bamburg from BGI right here with us. Jill, welcome.
Thank you.
So I should refer to you as professor because you are one of the co-founders of Bainbridge Graduate Institute, right?
That's correct. I was with Gifford and Libba all the way through the journey.
What was it's in its 10th year now, is that right?
That's correct.
And for the frame of reference, it is May the 7th, 2012 as we record this show. So congratulations on your 10th year. Why'd you do it?
Well, I think all of us had a similar motivation, which was we were looking for a place with leverage. And we had lots of dreams and stars in our eyes about changing the world and making it a better place. And we all came to the conclusion that the biggest leverage would be from changing business, and the biggest lever for changing business would be business education. And so this seemed like a good bet as a place to put energy to try to change things.
Well, you come from one of the, at least what's recognized as one of the best business schools in all of the world at Stanford.
Right.
And you want to change the world? Is that part of that world that you want to change?
That is part of the world that I want to change, and actually Stanford has also changed quite a bit since I've been there. When I was there, about 10% of the students were in something called the Public Management Program, which was interested in making business do things for the public good. Today, I think a third of the students are involved in that program one way or another. So there is a lot of movement among the students, but and there's also a lot of movement in the business world. The people who are moving slowly are the professors.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about that, are you talking about like one of the courses that you teach, the foundations of a sustainable business? More and more businesses are understanding the importance of sustainability?
Right, that's true. And in our school, everything that we do has to do with sustainability, and all of our professors are on the cutting edge of bringing sustainability into their disciplines. Where it's hard is in more traditional institutions, where people have been raised in the old disciplinary silos with a set curriculum and a certain amount of things that they think they have to cover. And if you ask them to not only squeeze in sustainability, but to fundamentally rethink their basic premises in order to accommodate it in a meaningful way, that's more than they're willing to bite off at this point.
What is sustainability?
That's a good question. I think I always start with the Brundtland definition, the Brundtland Commission definition from 1987, which is the idea that we want to do business and development in such a way that the interests of the present generation are met, as well as without compromising the needs of future generations. And so there's both an intergenerational component to it and an intra-generational component, and it has both social and environmental considerations as part of it, in addition to financial considerations. So it's taking a much more holistic approach to business and doing work in the world.
So when you have students come to the Bainbridge Graduate Institute and then they learn that definition of sustainability for the very first time, do any of them ask, but government's not that way? Government's not sustainable because of the incredible debt that the United States has, and our debt isn't as bad as some other nations.
Yeah, that is less of a concern. Our students come to us primed for this kind of an approach to business. If they're not already sort of interested in this area, they would end up going someplace else. And they, at some point or another in their life, have come to the conclusion that they want to work on their objective of changing the world through business, rather than through, say, public policy or advocacy or some of the other vehicles. Mm-hmm. So they're ready to go and they're ready to learn. And in many cases, they come in with their ideals outstripping their understanding of core business principles. And so we end up doing a lot of business work to convince them that profit, for example, is not a four-letter word.
You were the academic dean for quite some time.
Right.
There, and now you have stepped aside in favor of professorship.
Right.
One of the courses that you teach is social justice in business. Mm-hmm. Is that an oxymoron?
That's a good question. That's a reasonable question. I think there, in some ways, It is, but hopefully it's becoming less so. So if you talk about social justice, there's multiple dimensions. One dimension is how you treat your own employees and the people who work for you, including people who work for you in foreign countries where the laws are not as stringent as those in the United States, and you're trying to deal with human rights issues in the supply chain, and if you don't, you face public scrutiny, a la what happened to Apple this past winter. So there's that whole set of issues, and then there are also issues about treating your workforce reasonably in this country and not subjecting them to unnecessary layoffs, developing them as employees and as human beings, and integrating the human considerations into your pursuit of livelihood.
But in the pursuit of livelihood, in pursuit of the almighty dollar and shareholder value, it seems that the share price goes up whenever there are large layoffs.
Well, I think in the short term that may be true in some cases. It's not nearly as true now as it was some years ago when that whole idea had great currency in the 1980s, for example. But in the long term, there are an increasing number of studies, both in the private sector and in the academic world, that are showing that companies that treat the earth and their employees responsibly actually perform better, certainly over the long haul, than companies that do not. There may be short-term price spikes in the stock price, but long haul, the evidence is in now, and companies that behave responsibly do better financially as well.
Well, let's talk about two companies, and I'll name them, Nike and Gap. I think it was actually before BGI was formed is when they had issues with child labor.
Right.
And they seem to have responded positively, or did they?
Yeah, I mean, I know more about the situation with Nike than I do about the situation with the Gap, but I know that in that case, after multiple denials that Nike had to be concerned about these things because they didn't actually own the factories, it was their subcontractors that were doing all this bad stuff, the public brought them to heel and said, no, wait a minute, you are responsible throughout your supply chain. And as a result of that, Nike took very strong actions to clean up their supply chain and has in fact become a model for companies all over the world, and certainly in the apparel industry.
We're talking with Jill Bamburg, who is the former academic dean and is a professor and co-founder of the Bainbridge Graduate Institute. Be sure to go to the website. We're going to have it up on the screen several times. Learn an awful lot more about the university. It is teaching business in a way that perhaps you hadn't read about before, but maybe you will want to. Let's talk about your book, Getting to Scale. One of the things real early on in the book is that you talk about a disturbing sale of a number of high-profile, socially responsible businesses to larger companies that had no apparent commitment to anything other than the traditional financial bottom line. Can companies exist today and thrive if the only bottom line they pay attention to is the traditional one, the financial one?
Yes, they can survive. Yes, they can thrive. But what's a more interesting trend is the fact that companies that pay attention to the triple bottom line can do as well as or better than. So it used to be argued that it was necessary to pursue a single bottom line in order to be competitive, in order to be successful. That is no longer true, and that's the good news.
Well, the Milton Friedman statement that is so often discussed is that the true socially responsible thing to do is to make sure of shareholder value. I understand that he actually recanted that and later on in his life. I don't know if that was true. I didn't hear it. Yeah. But if indeed it is better for your financial bottom line to be socially responsible, then it seems that Friedman was right.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. I mean, Friedman is usually the guy that we fight with, and there's another fellow named Edwin Freeman who actually is responsible for the notion of stakeholder capitalism as opposed to shareholder capitalism, and his view is that actually you will do better by your shareholders if you take into account the needs and interests of a multiplicity of stakeholders, and that's what the research is showing now. So I don't know that Friedman was right, but I'm not willing to give him much quarter. But I think that we are converging on this idea that there's more to life than just returning top dollar to your shareholders.
You also talk about in Getting to Scale that, that there might be some fundamental flaw in the way we were approaching socially responsible business, something that forced firms to sell out once they became large enough to actually make a difference. Are things changing?
Yeah, that was my great fear when I started doing the research around the book. And what I found was that there were some pitfalls that companies would fall into that would force them to sell. But those pitfalls were also avoidable. And the chief problem had to do with who their investors were. So if you got the wrong kind of investors into your business, then they would take it down a path of single bottom line profitability. Whereas if you were able to find a better kind of investor whose investment values were more aligned with your business values, then you could stay out of that rat race. The other thing is that if you grow more slowly and do much more bootstrapping and don't end up having to give up control of your business, then you're also able to pursue your values without selling out.
How do you not sell out, though? If you've got someone over here is offering you 5 times what you wanted, and someone over here who says, I'll give you what you wanted, and I will be responsible with it too. I mean, how do you not take this big dollar over here?
Well, it depends on who's on your board of directors, and it depends on how their voting rights are structured and so on. So you can get to some structural alternatives now, which have just recently come into existence, that will enable you to avoid selling out, being forced to sell out. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, in many cases, you can't, and that's in fact what happened to Ben & Jerry's, which was one of the cases that was so disturbing to me. On the other hand, there's this Chinese proverb that says, the soldiers come into a town to recruit all the soldiers, and a young man who's had a terrible injury in a horse accident isn't recruited, so he doesn't go off to his death. And there's a question about, is it good news or bad news? Was he lucky or was he unlucky? And I think in the case of Ben & Jerry's, it's really interesting because Unilever, at the time that they bought it, was considered just a horrible acquirer, and yet this year Unilever is at the top of the most admired major corporations for sustainability values. And I heard one person characterize the new CEO of Unilever as the new Ray Anderson, who was the great prophet in Fortune 500 sustainability circles. So, it was a good thing or a bad thing? We don't know.
How much of this, what we're talking about right now, gets into the curriculum at Bainbridge Graduate Institute?
All of it. From start to finish, we look at what's going on in the economic system today, how is it structured, what does it reward, what does it punish, and how are the rules structured. That's kind of our first quarter is called Capitalism in Context, Economics for People and Planet. So we're looking at, what is the context within which we're operating.
Would you say that again, Capitalism in Context?
Capitalism in Context, Economics for People and Planet. So that's the opening quarter. In our second quarter, and these are all integrated courses, by the way, in the second quarter, our focus is on values and value creation, business models for the 21st century, looking at the fact that you can, in fact, hold on to your values and build good into the DNA of your business if you choose to. And then our third quarter is called Means and Measures, Accounting for Triple Bottom Line Success. And there what we're looking at is both how do you attract the money to finance these ventures, and then how do you measure their success according to their financial, social, and environmental returns.
So that's the SROI, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Social return on investment. How is business in what you're talking about today different from when everything was brick and mortar?
Well, it's different in all sorts of ways. I think the biggest one is that there are reduced capital costs to get into business. So one of the barriers to entry is reduced, which makes it a whole lot easier for anybody to get into business. On the other hand, once you're in business, it's a heck of a lot more competitive than it used to be because everybody else can get in business too. So I think things are moving faster, and it's easier to get in but harder to stay ahead.
In business today, is it important that you have a global view regardless of your business?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I would say yes, absolutely. On the other hand, there's this whole local living economies movement that is very important to many of our students, and is
that
also,
I noticed you talk about in Getting to Scale.
Yep, and is also important to a lot of people in the business community, which is saying, what can we create in our local community? What can we build here? What can we sell here? How can we do business with each other in a way that will take into account all the social and environmental impacts without having them be away someplace? And I think the vision of people who are associated with that movement is that ultimately these small, healthy local communities would then become trading partners with other local communities, and that we would have a global order based on these nodes of trade rather than the current global order, which is dominated by very large corporations who are managing everyone else as more or less pawns in their high stakes game.
So, Professor, are very large corporations bad?
There are people who think that they are, because they are unable to take into account local impacts in quite the same way that somebody that lives in a community, works in a community, employs people in the community, throws away waste in the community. You don't have that same level of consciousness. In addition, they tend to be financed by investors who are much more interested in the single bottom line than they are in a broader set of considerations, and I think they are bad from that standpoint.
Let's go back to getting to scale. Mm-hmm. Mission comes first. You say it's no accident that businesses included in your book are called mission-driven, and they truly are. I thought that the mission of the business was to serve the shareholders.
Well, again, that's the old Milton Friedman view, which I think has been, it's certainly hanging on, but I think many people in business now have moved beyond that. Even people in very large corporations have moved beyond that. In these businesses that I was looking at, they are truly mission-driven, and sometimes at BGI we talk about the fourth bottom line. People, profit, and planet is the way the triple bottom line is formulated, and we often talk about purpose as a potential fourth bottom line. And in the case of the businesses that I was looking at, purpose comes first. So what is it that they really want to make happen in the world, and then how can they array the finances and all the other pieces of the puzzle to support that mission?
I want to talk about Walmart in just a minute, but first we're going to take a break. We're very fortunate to have Jill Bamburg with us, who is one of the co-founders of the Bainbridge Graduate Institute. Be sure to go to the website. It's up on the screen now. And Ms. Bamburg also continues to teach at the university, and it's a very, very interesting place in its theories of business and the fact that it is a business school. I want to talk about Walmart. A lot of people Walmart gets some bad press. It's a big giant corporation that comes in and it closes down small businesses. At the same point in time, when Hurricane Katrina happened, I was working with a company, and we went down to try to help some people in the area where we were that had been just dramatically impacted by the hurricane. And Walmart was everywhere helping people. Are there two sides to large businesses that can be both good and bad, or can a company just be bad all the time?
Well, a company could be bad all the time, but I think most companies are not bad all the time. I think most of them are populated by people. And I mean, that seems obvious and sort of stupid to say, but they are made up of people, and people can be both good and bad. And what you want to do is set up the incentives and the structures and the governance procedures so that people are incented to do good things rather than bad things. And I think in the case of Walmart, there are some structural issues with Walmart that have yet to be resolved that are in fact bad. Their business model is based on paying very low wages and not offering health care benefits to their employees. Now, they could change that business model. The question is, could they change that business model and still offer the everyday low prices that benefit the broader community? And how do you weigh the benefits of those two things? I don't think there's one answer to that question. And I think the other thing, though, is with tremendous concentrations of wealth and power, which you have in these large corporations, there's a tremendous potential for good and evil. And Walmart can mobilize its resources to do something like help out with Katrina, and thank goodness they did.
Getting back to the book, and this is actually a quote from you, you say, any business can do it. This was the greatest surprise to me in the research for the book. I set out to cast a wide net in terms of industries and had absolutely no trouble finding mission-driven businesses in every segment I researched.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, and now I won't say that I researched every segment, but I was trying to get beyond the usual suspects that are talked about in socially responsible business. And there are a lot of these businesses in the food business, and I wanted to get well beyond that. For me, I'm not a big fan of real estate operations traditionally and real estate developers, and yet I found people that were doing really interesting things in the real estate market.
Such as?
Well, there was a firm down in Nashville, Tennessee, where the fellow who set up the real estate firm had set up a foundation at the same time that he set up his company. And what he did was put a percentage of his profits on every single transaction into the foundation, which then supported things in the community.
From the very first day?
From the very first day.
Wow.
But what was even better was he then convinced all of the people with whom he did business, the mortgage brokers, the escrow agents, the title insurance company, and so on, to also put a piece of their profits on all of the transactions with his organization into this foundation, and then it awarded funds in the community. In addition, when he actually went to beyond selling and into development, he developed urban infill units so that he was avoiding suburban sprawl, which he saw as a major disadvantage. So, you know, there are good ways of doing all of these kinds of businesses.
Even being a real estate developer, there's good ways of doing it. Another part that you talk about in the book is organic is the way to grow. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a play on the words about organic and organic food and organic growth, but it's a very serious proposition. And I was writing this book sort of in the wake of the burst in the internet bubble. And at that point, everybody was hell-bent on achieving a first-mover advantage and getting big fast. That was Amazon's big mantra. Get big fast, and people really wanted to do that, and that's what the venture capital model is based on, and so on. What I found in these businesses that wanted to stay true to their values were they needed to grow a little bit more slowly and a little bit more organically for a couple of reasons. The biggest one was they didn't want to take in investment capital that was oriented towards growth, because then they would have to choose away from their values in favor of growth. The other thing is that a slower growth path allows the founders to stay involved longer and to grow into their roles as managers of a larger organization without having to bring in a new management team that can manage growth at the next stage.
But you know, when Sam Walton started his business, it was small. He grew. Isn't that where we all want to go?
Yes, and the point of growing more slowly and more organically is it gives you more time to grow into that role. There are exceptional human beings who can grow that quickly, but most of us need a little bit more time and a little bit more training, a little bit more thought and care in order to be able to manage the next challenges at the next level.
Is there an average student, an average person who becomes a student at BGI?
That's a great question. I think there are multiple average students. Our age range this year is 23 to 68.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah, and our median age is 35, so we have a slightly older student population than the MBA population as a whole, and that's where I like to teach. So the multiple people, I'd say there's two broad categories. There are people who are younger people still making their mark in the world on the uptick of their career. They know that they are motivated by idealism and they want to go to business school to be able to get ahead, and they don't want to leave their values at the door. So that's one group. Then there's another group of people who've been around the block a time or two, and they've been operating in the business world, and they are now ready to make a shift in their career and get their work life more aligned with their values. And those are the students I particularly like to teach, and those are some of the older students.
Interesting, because in Getting to Scale, your book, you have a section on build your values into the brand.
Right. And
How do you do that?
Yeah, the way you do that, I mean, the importance of this is if you end up being forced to sell, or you end up being forced to bring in outside investors in order to grow to scale to get to the next level in the business, if the values are built into the brand, then it's very difficult to jettison them because that's what the value proposition is to consumers. Great example, Honest Tea, Odwalla Juice, Burt's Bees, any of these kinds of companies, those are all consumer-facing value propositions, right? And so if anybody comes in and invests in the business, they're going to invest in those values because that's what you're selling. Whereas if it's sort of a nice to have, like we're a company that, does dirty business, but we treat our employees nicely, how long are you going to treat your employees nicely, and what's going to keep that good treatment in place?
Competition is generally good for business, isn't it?
Yes, as is cooperation frequently.
Why should a student come to Bainbridge Graduate Institute instead of fill in the blank business school?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I always tell the students that one of the most important things you're buying with a business school is a network. Okay? You're going to be in business school for 2 years, but you're going to be part of the Alumni Association for the rest of your life. And the question is, who do you want in that Alumni Association with you, and who do you want to be able to call on throughout your business career? And if you're interested in sustainable business, if you're interested in using business for good, I think you want to be part of the BGI Alumni Association. At one point, we joked about business school was really just a 2-year initiation rite for getting into the Alumni Association. And I think that's true, because we're finding already, even though we only are here for 10 years and our 500th graduate will walk across the stage this June, already there's a very dense, rich network of BGI alums who are helping each other out all the time.
Now, the show is not a BGI infomercial. I wanted everyone to know that. But I've been so intrigued by what I've heard and what you teach. In the minute and a half or so that we have left, over the 10 years that BGI has been in existence, what do you feel has been yours and its greatest success? And perhaps what is a success yet to be?
Great question. I think our greatest success so far is the nearly 500 alums that we have out in the world doing good work. That's my legacy, those people and the work that they're doing. I think the piece yet to come, at this point we have 2 programs, a hybrid program which is out at Islandwood on Bainbridge Island, and then we have a Seattle Metro program, which is just getting started. And I think our great unrealized potential is in that Seattle Metro program. And I think that we'll be able to reach a different kind of student there and make a different kind of impact, especially in this metro area. So that's what I'd say.
How about the student who's watching this from the Democratic Republic of Congo and says, wow, that sounds like a cool place to go?
Well, at this point, we would love to have that person come over and join us here. And in the future, we hope to be able to serve more directly. So stay tuned. That's probably chapter 3 of our story.
Well, Professor Bamburg, thank you very much for being with us. This is Bainbridge Graduate Institute. Please be sure to go to the website. Again, it's up on the screen. There is so much meat to this university. You're going to want to check it out for yourself. We'll see you right here next time on Rainmakers TV. Take care.